I'm digging back deep into teenage Jen back in London, Ontario, where I'd started working at City Lights bookstore when I was 12 years old for the inimitable Mark Emery, Canada's King of Pot. I don't know if you know Mark, but he's famous for having spent a good chunk of time in a prison in the States for pot. Yeah, did a good. Yeah, he did it. I think he enjoyed it. Honestly, like I think it gave him a real thrill to do that. I'm not going to say that for sure, but I just knowing him, I think that that probably was the best day of his life when he got called down to the States to serve his time. So I worked from the time I was 12 years old as a bookstore clerk. Met so many interesting people. Joined the Freedom Party of Ontario when I was 13. Another story, I stopped being conservative at the age of 5 when I thought that Gerald Ford had a really nice face and carried a sign to kindergarten that said, "Re-elect Gerald Ford," that I made in the basement with my dad. It was the last time I ever did that. Yeah, so that's got absolutely nothing to do with this story. This story takes place when I was 18, 19, had just moved downtown London, Ontario, out on my own for the first time. And there used to be this goth couple that came into the store, and I just found them so sexy and intriguing and amazing. And his name was Damien. It had to be Damien, right? And her name was Carrie, but it's it just seemed so perfect, so perfect. And they would come in and we would talk and talk and talk and talk, and they would just hang out in the store for hours and we'd chat. I loved them. And one day they invited me to come over to their place after I finished work. And I was a fairly naive in some ways, 18, 19-year-old, despite the fact that part of my job at the store involved, well, I was the pornography bagger. Uh, we had tons and tons of porn magazines that would come in. I wasn't allowed to buy the porn mags, but I was allowed to sort through them and decide which ones went nicely together. I like to think that I was very uh, discerning in my in my ability to put porn mags together in a nice way, and then decide how much they were worth. So naive but not naive at the same time, if you know what I'm saying. So I went over to Damien and Carrie's place after work one night. So we walked all the way through downtown London, down by the river, out down one of the streets that heads out of downtown to a nice kind of, downscale, starting to be suburban neighborhood, just on the verge of the urban core. And they propositioned me, and I wasn't really sure what to do with that. So I did what I always do under those circumstances and politely declined, and then hung out with them for the rest of the night. So jump forward in time to about 3 years later, when I actually had, I'd actually, I didn't like school. I hated school. I can't even begin to tell you how much I hated school. So I actually left myself a credit short at the end of my high school experience because I didn't want to be forced into going to university. But then when I got to be 23, I decided that I might as well finish high school just to have the diploma, because it was at that point I would be a mature student and I could go back to. There was basically no reason to keep myself one credit short any longer, because I could go back to university I could refuse to go back to university as a mature student. So I was down at a coffee shop not so far from my house, my parents' house, when I'd moved home. And who is there sitting at a table in the coffee shop but a girl from my high school class, 1 year behind me, Julia. And with her is Damien. Still all gothed up. Julia's kind of half goth. I'm kind of half goth too. I'm like never hardcore goth, but I've always worn pretty much black clothing all the time, mostly because you don't have to worry about spilling stuff on yourself. So they asked me if I would come over. So I'm like a few years older. I'm think I'm a little bit wiser at this point. I'm a lot more experienced. I had my first sexual experience at 19. How many people lied in their first sexual experience because they didn't want the other person to be so worried about about being with a virgin? Did anybody else do that? Or was that just me? Was that just me? No, somebody else? Yeah, so I said, sure. Got my dad to drive me downtown to where Damien and Julia lived. And the first thing they said was, let's go get something to eat or something to drink. We went to the variety store and we got Jell-O because it's both. And we went back to their place and I spent the rest of the day listening to every single album that the Dead Kennedys ever recorded. And it was an absolutely wonderful, fun experience. And that's my story about Damien. No sex. No sex.